Hey, folks, welcome back to What's Next Beyond Service. Today is episode number 37, No Excuses, Just Solutions. And our guest today is Robert Poage. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Robert served in the Army. He had a career in the Army as a transportation officer. He also worked with the 10th Special Forces Group. I mean, he worked with other folks as well, but, it's kind of important mention, I think, to talk about, working with the Special Forces folks. And he retired as a Chief Warrant Officer. He is currently the owner agent of TCN Logistics LLC, which is in the freight transportation industry. So he owns his own business, and he's doing great things there. For those of you that are on LinkedIn, you probably see Robert's post quite often. And as I was just mentioning before hitting record here and going live, that Robert is one of the most positive folks out there on LinkedIn that you're going to come across. So if you're not connected with Robert on LinkedIn, I absolutely recommend that you do that because he's got very good content. It's meaningful for what he does in the industry, right? Because he talks about things in his profession, but he also talks to life issues that are very important. He's got a great background, so he brings a lot of sage advice to things that are happening in life outside of business. So he's kind of a catch-all for goodness on LinkedIn. So I want to make sure that I said that before we get going here, Robert. So welcome again to our show. And we just talked a little bit about you. So let's do this. Let's just jump right in and you tell us about your time in the Army. If you can tell us, first of all, what was your why? What was the deciding thing that made you think, what, the Army's for me, and that's what I want to do?
Hey, Scott, thanks for the introduction, and appreciate the kind words. But so I grew up in a military family. My grandfather, dad, uncles, aunt were all military. So it's kind of, knew about it. Not very many were career military. Most of my family was either Navy or Air Force. I think we talked about it the other day. My dad was in the Navy in Vietnam. He was a corpsman though, so he spent some time with the Marines.
Right.
So I just kind of always, since a kid, always knew that I wanted to go into the military. And then my grandfather was a truck driver, and I just always have had this passion for trucks. And since I was a little kid, I grew up in the remote back parts of Alaska. My dad and my grandfather worked the oil fields and stuff. So just always loved trucks. And so when it was time to join the military, I actually went to the Navy first because I wanted to go in the Seabees. And they, at the time they said they didn't have any openings. They put me in like open contract. I was like, that's not for me. So I walked next door to the Army and, want to join the Army as a truck driver. And that's all I wanted to do, And so, long story short, that's what happened,
Right. Well, a couple of things there. One, I haven't met anyone who was born and lived in Alaska and wasn't a tough person, inside and out. That's a tough environment, very different, right, than it is growing up in the lower 48s. And my brother, he was born there. I was sharing with you on our call. My dad was in the Air Force, and so his first duty station was Anchorage, Alaska. And I guess they were there for 3 years. And my brother was born there. So, and then, as far as your background, how many of us that are, veterans that served, parents or family members served, it's kind of becomes the family business that, that's what we do. And there's a lot of different reasons for why, but, having the background of family members helps you make that decision because you see the goodness in their service. And, sometimes you feel, wow, that was good for them. I'm going to do the same thing. And of course, there are other things that are laced into that, but that's a very common theme with folks. Certainly was for me. My grandfather was a Marine. I always joke that, my my dad was in the Air Force. My grandfather was in the Marine Corps. My uncle was in the Navy. stepdad was in the Navy. My brother was in the Army. But the person with the best stories was my grandfather. So, hey, I'm going to be a Marine. He was a good recruiter.
I always tell people, my whole family was Navy and Air Force. They'd have one smart guy that joined the Army. So, we have our different takes on it. But
yeah, that's right. No, that's funny. My brother-in-law, he's retired Army, and he tears me up with jokes. I just can't remember them. And so when he starts, I just say, oh, hold on, let me get my coffee because I know this is going to be a long one. So just keep it coming,
Sure.
But,
and I think part of my growing up, when I say I grew up in the back parts of Alaska, so my dad bought a bunch of land from a state auction, and there was not even a road getting out there. It was a dirt trail. So we didn't have any power, running water. My wife's now, she's like, I can't believe I'm one of 8 kids. She's like, I can't believe your mom was pregnant in Alaska and had to use an outhouse,
Oh, geez.
And you start thinking about, for my generation to see your mom using a scrub board to wash clothes, was not very common, but that was kind of the way we grew up was, you carry buckets of water. When I joined the Army, my parents still didn't have indoor bathroom in the house, and stuff like that. So going to the Army was actually, believe it or not, was actually a comfort upgrade,
No, that's right. Alaska is, it's still the frontier. A lot of folks don't think of it in those terms. And I saw some statistics on Alaska the other day. It has like twice the coastline of the continental United States. I guess it's the distance from side to side is like driving from Santa Barbara, California to, someplace in New York City. There's just all these, it's huge, and it's got something, X amount of millions of lakes that are at least 20 acres. That's crazy. It's an amazing place. So, well, good on you that you survived Alaska and, that you're doing all the good things you're doing today. So let's do this, Robert. Let's go ahead and talk about your time in service in the Army. I know you had a long career, and you did a lot of stuff that's interesting. So if you can just share with us the things that are important to you, things that you feel are significant, and you want to talk about and share with the audience.
Sure. So I joined as a truck driver, and I spent 4 years in the Army, and it was kind of, I joined in 91. So it was right at the end of the Gulf War, and Somalia kind of kicked off, but that was only very select units that went to Somalia. I went to air-assault school. I was kind of like looking for the excitement, but it just wasn't quite there. I got out after 4 years because that was kind of my whole plan all along, was get out and go drive a truck. Because like I said, I always wanted to be a truck driver. So I got out, and after 4 years, and I started driving truck over the road. 22 years old, and just, I go from being an E4 in the Army back then with no money to all of a sudden I felt like I had a pocket full of money all the time. Life was great. But then as I'm driving, I went to work for this one company, and I think what attracted me to them at the time was that they're a flatbed company. Was they have very high standards, like everything, trucks had to be spotless all the time. You had to chain and tarp things a certain way. It was a lot more like the military. Like you almost think that the guy that owned it was, had been former military. And that's where I actually met my wife. She was an accountant there, but as I was talking to a lot of guys, they're like, oh, there's a lot of veterans that work there. And they kept telling me, oh, I wish I would have stayed in. If I would have stayed in, I'd be retired right now. I should have stayed in. I'm like, at the time, I guess about 25, 26 years old. And me and my wife were getting pretty serious. I told her, I think I'm back in the Army for 3 years. If I hate it, I get back out. I can do anything for 3 years. If I like it, I stay. I said, but I never want to go through life wishing or saying I wish I had done something. So, right. I went back in, and I was actually, 98, I went back in, and I was having a lot of fun. Had some pretty cool jobs. Actually, I went back in as a truck driver, and I was driving the heads, which are the big trucks that haul the tanks, doing that kind of stuff. And then I got a job to go drive for the assistant division commander, 1-star. It was probably a really changing point in my career as a young E5, was because I got to, now you're around somebody that's got like tons of knowledge, at least in my mind. You know, he's like super smart guy, teaching me a lot about life. And he was an infantry guy, paratrooper, you know, spent most of the time in the Ranger paratrooper, sent me off to airborne school, you know, gave me that opportunity. And that just opened the door up for me for a lot of things. So I changed jobs, became a transportation coordinator planner. And when I came back from Korea, I got a chance to go to Fort Bragg, which is the, you know, everybody's airborne there, to jump out of planes. And I went into special ops as the only transportation dude in my unit, you know, planning stuff. And then Afghanistan kicked off and we're deploying, and, you know, life was getting busy, you know, and I had a little 2-year-old, 3-year-old daughter at the time. And, and then I got a chance to, you know, got selected to go to warrant officer school, and they just started this whole career field called mobility warrants in the Army. And they're just to help plan these big moves, and everything was just going really fast.
That was a smart decision by the Army, by the way.
and it wasn't ever my plan to become a warrant. I tell people it was the best mistake I ever made, you know, in my career. I mean, it set me, and I just, everything. And then I got to go to, you know, I left 7th Special Forces, went to 10th Special Forces as a mobility warrant, the first one they ever had. So the good thing is there's no expectations. So you go in, your boss, you know, they don't know what to expect of you. So it kind of helps a lot. But we deployed a lot, did a lot of movements, had a great time there. A lot of really good leaders. And again, like I said, it was just everything's going really fast. And all of a sudden we're 15 years into the Army, you know, and time that, you know, it doesn't realize that I've got now my son. And I had some bosses that had a lot of faith in me and gave me a lot of opportunity to grow.
Right.
And then after I made W3, then I had to leave group because it was, you know, kind of get promoted up out of the job. And I went back to Fort Bragg and working on like the retrograde out of Iraq, getting everybody out of Iraq. And if you remember in 2011, President Obama said, hey, everybody's gonna be home by Christmas. And I was sitting in Kuwait at the time, and Christmas Eve, I got on an airplane and flew in and landed in Baghdad, Iraq. And it was probably out of all the deployments I've been on, because I've been on 5 deployments, I think, by that time before this, it was the most eerie feeling because Baghdad was quiet. And if you ever been in and out of Baghdad, it was never quiet. There was always a ton of people. So we landed in Baghdad, and there was about 18 of us, and going in, and I was just thinking the irony. I'm like, you know, here we are, we're flying the wrong way. You know, the president said everybody's gonna be home, and here we're going the wrong way back into Iraq. After that, we went to Afghanistan again, and started doing all the retrograde there. Got done with that job, went to US Transcom, which is like they handle all the transportation for the whole military, no matter what branch, you know, it's
right.
And
it's big leagues.
And I got, you know, went there again as the first mobility warrant to go to headquarters SDDC. So again, you know, there's, you know, you're kind of writing the you know, standards or whatever,
right?
You know, but you know, they don't know what to expect out of you really. And had some great bosses there again, and went back to Afghanistan just for a short trip dealing with the retrograde again. And then I decided it was time to retire because my daughter was getting ready to be done with middle school. We'd promised her 4 years and 1 high school since we've been dragging her around. So that kind of, you know, was the culmination of my career. You know, I retired in 2015 and then start a whole new chapter of your life, you know.
Right. Well, you know, Robert, a number of things you said to me says a lot about you, but it also says, it speaks to your experiences. You know, a number of times you talked about the good folks that you worked for or with. I mean, that's so important because those are the people that shape your, you know, your profession. They shape your professional, you know, what you do in your profession, and they're the ones that you learn from. And it's fantastic when you have mentors that care about you and, you know, shine the light on the path for, hey, these are the things that you need to understand and do. You know, occasionally you might get, you know, a couple of subpar folks that you work for, but, you know, you deal with it, right, and you move on. And then the other thing, you talked about the job you had driving the General. I had a person come on and interview a couple of weeks ago, Angel Shaw. She was in the Army, you know, the Canadian forces, And she had a, a point in her career as an enlisted gal, driving a general around as well, and just the different people that put you in front of, and the things that you would never have seen doing any other job in the military. Is just so you learn a lot, and if you do well, then sometimes a general will make sure that you go to a really good next, follow-on job that's good for your career. Not that it's like a big hookup, but it's something that they have the ability to ensure happens. And so, there's a lot of goodness to that too. And again, you learn so much from that. And so, yeah, busy career. And I know we could probably really get into the weeds on that and talk about a lot of specific things, but, for the sake of timing here, let's shift gears and talk about your transition from the Army. So that's kind of where you left off when you were just talking. And so I was gonna, I know we talked about this, but I was gonna just ask, for the audience here, what was that thing? We all of us who serve, we all leave at some point for various reasons, right? Either we decide that it's time to go, and here's our decision point, or maybe we get injured and we can't serve anymore. So there's a lot of ways that you can leave the military. So you kind of hinted, as to what that was. So yeah, let's talk about that, because that's the impetus for this show, is the transition piece. When we do leave service, to talk about, well, here's why I left, and here's how it impacted me. These are the challenges. These are some of the unknowns that I experienced as I left, and during this time building to where I am today. You mentioned about your daughter and wanted to have stability. I mean, that's so important, and that was one of the reasons why I decided to retire as well. So let's pick up there.
So like I said, we promised my daughter, because she was getting, she's in middle school. It's tough, as they're moving around and having to make new friends. The one goodness, I guess, is when she was little, we got her into playing ball. And so she played softball, and she was playing now select softball. So, that was always her way in people, was softball field. You get there. So whether it was going into middle school, going into meeting a new team, whether she's always the new kid on the team. And then the other thing is, since we've made that promise or that commitment to my daughters, it was coming to that point. It's like, okay, the Army's not going to leave me at Scott Air Force Base for 4 more years. I'm not going to get 6 years here. So either I'm going to have to become a bachelor, or we have to break our promise to my daughter. One of those two things is, so then you start weighing in what are we going to do, and then I started looking around. I'm like, there's no other real jobs that I have a passion for. Like, I really wanted to go to Scott Air Force Base, to STDC after leaving Fort Bragg, just because I thought that'd be just another learning place for me. Well, then I started looking, I'm like, okay, everything else is like doctoring, and I don't really want to go write pubs and that kind of stuff, so,
right.
So there's nothing exciting for me after coming, I'd spent so much time in SOF, and then, then dealing with the retrograde, and, being in the Theater Sustainment Command, dealing with retrograde, and SDC, I'm like, okay, and so I just said, it's kind of time to move, another chapter of the life. And
right.
I'd been offered to stay there as a GS employee, but I was like, it's just not even really what I want to do. I want to just, go start a new life someplace. And if I could back up, like, one of the great jobs I had early on was at Fort Carson as a young NCO before I became a general driver. I had the sergeant major who was like your old school sergeant major. He was tough, but you just learned so much from him. And he had retired. We kind of lost contact, but he retired. And then through my jobs in the military, he started working for a defense contractor, and crossed paths with him. So he asked me, he's like, hey, what are you going to do when you retire? I'm like, well, we decided based on weather. I've never lived in Texas a day in my life, never been stationed here. We just picked a spot on the map and moved, but I'm like, based on the weather, schools, softball weather, whatever.
Sure.
And said, we're going to go to Texas, and you got a job? I'm like, nah, but we'll find one. I'll find a job. I'm not worried about it. And he's like, hey, send me your resume. I got this lady you need to go work for. And so I try to tell people, I'm like, you don't know the power of networking, the power of connections, and just you hear so many times, and it's usually from the people that are still in the military, that all these companies just want to hire you because you're a veteran. But the reality is it's a whole lot different once you get out. I mean, it's like,
it certainly is. Yeah.
Your connections
Absolutely.
and your networking, and you can't just start networking the day you walk out the door. You got to start, the networking begins way before that. And I wish I'd known more about LinkedIn long before that. I mean, luckily, Scott Air Force Base had a really good guy named Scott that ran the transition program, and he's the one that introduced me to LinkedIn and was like big about getting us involved in LinkedIn. But it doesn't happen a lot for a lot of people, but I tell people, I'm like, you got to build a network, because your network is worth its weight in gold. So
yeah, yeah, pardon me, it absolutely is. And your story reminds me of mine to a degree, for similar reasons. For me, it was a decision to accept the follow-on orders, even though it had changed, right? They wanted me to stay next year, but the same mental calculus is, well, if I do this, then that means I will be a geobachelor, which I didn't want to do. I've done that, I had done that a number of times. And so that certainly wasn't appealing because of the age that my daughters were getting at, and wanted to have stability for them, because we were going back to where we'd spent a lot of time. So that was positive. And it's where we were going to retire anyhow. And so, yeah, the thought of taking a job I'm a logistician, by trade, military. The thought of continuing to do that, I mean, that was okay, but I also at that point wanted to do something different, and I didn't want to do it in the Northern Virginia area. So it's funny, you talk to your daughter and softball. With my daughters, it was soccer, and it was the same thing. That was the thing that was kind of their end for wherever we would move to. That was the one consistent thing, right? Is that they played soccer, and so that was goodness for them. But it was tough always being the new gal, whether it's on a team or at school. And so to be able to provide that to them, that security of, hey, this is where we are now, and those days are behind you. That's a big thing to promise, and then especially to deliver on. So God bless you for the decision that you made. And I, again, for folks that know Robert, he'll talk about his daughter from time to time on LinkedIn, and I love those because it always reminds me of my relationship with my daughters and being a dad and the goodness involved. And he's always got a good story with a bit of a lesson attached to it, when he shares those stories. So, so sorry for interrupting, but I felt compelled to mention that.
It's funny because my son, my kids are 5.5 years apart, so my son was finished up second grade when I retired, and he had just started playing lacrosse, which I knew nothing about lacrosse, and I think that's probably why he liked it. But that was his biggest question. I said, hey, we're going to move to Texas. And he's like, well, do they have lacrosse in Texas? And I'm like, yep, I've already looked it up. We're going to move to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they've got lacrosse. And that was, he was like, okay, well, we can move as long as they got lacrosse, and that was, my daughter, she didn't really want to leave her friends. We're in Illinois, but she loves the whole ranch style, which I don't know because I never grew up around ranch, but she loves like cowboy boots and cows and everything. I swear she's going to get married in a barn, and it won't be like one of these fancy ones. It'll be a working barn probably if she gets married. But so the transition down was pretty good. And like I said, we hadn't found a house yet to rent because we rented for the first year, and she was already on a softball team because I knew it's like, you got to get her plugged in, get her making friends, so that life is good for her, and then, because you're eighth grade, 14 years old, whatever, 15 years old, it's
a tough time.
It's a tough time. So we did, and we just I don't have any family here. My wife had one aunt and uncle that lived in the whole state of Texas. I don't have any other family in the whole state of Texas, as big as my family is. And so we just kind of came here not knowing anybody, but it's worked out great. I mean, I tell people you couldn't pull my wife and kids out of here with a dump truck if you tried. I mean, I actually love the community that we landed in. So,
well, that's good to know. And I know a lot of folks who were born in Texas, who live there now, and everyone loves it. It's the great state of Texas, and there's a lot of reasons why folks love Texas. If you want to work, hey, that's probably a really good place to live, right? Among many other things. You mentioned lacrosse, and we didn't actually talk about that on our pregame call. My youngest daughter got into lacrosse in addition to soccer. So yeah, I'm a lacrosse guy too. Didn't know anything about it until my daughter took it up, and it was very different from watching soccer. And because it was a little slower, like the first year, and then they become proficient, and like anything else, it starts getting better and faster. And I wound up getting wrangled into being the board president for the girls lacrosse team, and it was actually really fun. I did it for about 2 years, I guess, but and that just helped me to be closer to my daughter too, because I was a little more involved than I probably would have been outside of like I was in soccer, taking them all the practices, all the travel games, and this you lived it too. But it's all good, and I tell you, I miss it.
So it's I tell people my son was doing jiu-jitsu for quite a while and lacrosse. I'm like, you never think when you're little that you're ever going to be telling your son, hey, you need to choke him out, or hey, you need to hit this kid a little bit harder. Hey, take him out of his cleats. You never think that those are going to be the words out of your mouth to your kid. But it's an exciting time when you can see your kids have goals and help them start reaching their goals. I mean, we're pretty blessed. My daughter's she's a junior in college this year, and she's still playing softball. Still loves the sport, and my son's still playing lacrosse, and loves the sport.
Yeah.
And they both have phenomenal grades in school, have goals. They both know what they want to be much earlier in life than I ever knew what I wanted to be, and they're both pretty strong in their faith. So it's we're pretty blessed with the way our kids have grown, in doing things.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and Robert, that doesn't just happen, right? I mean, some of life will just happen, right? Because that's life marches forward. But to me, that's testimony of good parenting. You and your wife are doing the right things, and we all make mistakes as parents, but on measure, it really sounds like you guys are doing a great job raising your kids, and the proof's in the pudding, and listening to the things. And this is something that I try to remember to share with folks that have kids, because I'm at that stage. In fact, I got kind of joked about that I've got all these stories about empty nesting, but man, that's a transition too. But just real quick, for folks that are transitioning from the military, especially if your kids' transitions are right there with yours, meaning that they're moving on to, they're leaving the house, either going to college, or they're, stepping out and they're, going to get a job and move out of the house. If that transition happens on top of yours or not long after, boy, that's a whole other thing that you really have to understand and be ready for too. It's easy to get lost in your transition because you've spent a career or, however long in service, and that you're trying to make sure that you're hitting all the wickets, and that you're putting yourself forward in the best light to have a solid transition. If that transition's happening too, man, that gets extra hard, because that'll surprise you. And as a dad of a daughter, and we didn't really talk about this on the call, but if you don't mind sharing, how did it feel to drop your daughter off at college and then turn around and drive back home without her?
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's probably one of the most emotional events. I mean, just, from one, I mean, she's going about 2.5 hours away, but you're taking your daughter and dropping her off. And then you're going through, like you said, you transition from the military, and it's like, hey, you can make anything work. But then you're like, hey, did I do everything to set her up right for this point in her life? Have I done everything that I was supposed to do as a dad? And it's a very emotional. And then of course, then my wife's also emotional, so you're trying not to be too emotional because your wife's already emotional and your daughter's emotional, and it's like, so it was a very, very tough, time, but it's, you know, it's worked out well, because I think one of the things that, you know, we were able to do ahead of time, like from the time my daughter was going into high school, really made her start making a lot of her own decisions, you know, and having a reason why she made the decisions, and not just an emotional decision. Like, hey, why do you want, you know, so she picked her own college. It wasn't like I steered her towards this college. And so I think I told you on the call, like the college that she picked, you know, she went to a junior college for her first year. And she had other softball offers, you know, but they paid 100% of her college for the first 2 years. And she had other offers, but she said, "Dad, this is why I want to go to this college. You know, here's the one I want to go to, and here's why." And I'm like, "Okay, it's your, you know, you're 18. This is your decision. I'll support you, because it's not a bad decision." I had other choices. I'm like, "Hey, I would much rather go visit you down in Waco, where there's a lot more going on down there than there is up in Vernon, Texas. If you've ever been to Vernon, Texas, there's nothing but a mental hospital up there, you know." So I'm like, you know, it's not wrong, but hey, and it worked out well. Now she's in a private university, which is where she really wanted to go, and she loves it. She's growing. She's majoring in chemistry, which is another thing that I would never want to do.
Wow,
She's double majoring,
smart gal.
math and chemistry. Nothing I would ever want to do, but she loves it. So it's like, I was joking with someone on LinkedIn the other day. I said, I never thought chemistry could be exciting until you see my daughter with a huge personality that loves chemistry. Everything's chemistry, you know. So
yeah, that's awesome. You know, and again, as far as parenting goes, I mean, you had shared with me that, you know, from a younger age, that you guys gave your daughter latitude to make decisions. You know, that you were there for her, but you know, got her to understand that, hey, you become an adult quick, and you know, you need to be able, when from word go, when you step out of the house, you know, you need to be able to function as an adult. And so you guys knew that, and so you helped set her down that road to success, and now you're reaping the benefits in terms of the decisions that she is making. And like you said, you know, we're all different people. Your kids, I mean, even when you just look at your children, you know, my oldest daughter is a very different person than my youngest daughter, but they all make decisions. And, you know, whether it's the decision that you necessarily would have made, like you just said, hey, that's the decision for them. And they've made it. And wow, look at that. It's working. You know, holy smokes. That's such a great thing as a parent, to sit back and see that and say, that's my daughter, or that's my son. And I am so proud of them for, you know, what they're doing. Yeah, my oldest daughter, she has a degree in forensic biology, and she got a minor in chemistry. And I took chemistry in college, and I thought it sucked. It was hard. I mean, I got C's. It was tough, right? I mean, I'll admit that. But yeah, I mean, that's something I wouldn't choose to do either. But man, you know, to choose that and then to thrive in it, and I think she probably has your personality in terms of being upbeat and positive, at least from what I could tell from, you know, the time seeing your post about her, and when you chat about her on LinkedIn.
Yeah, her and I tell people, her and I are a lot more alike, and my son and my wife are a lot more alike, which has its good and its ups and downsides. I mean, so that means me and my daughter probably clash more too, you know, but on the other hand, we do get along really well. But yeah, it's, you know, when you're talking about your classes, I mean, so she made it, you know, my son just had awards. He's a freshman in high school, A honor roll. And he was, you know, he's laughing because, I mean, he's a big school. There's 800 something kids in his graduating class. You know, in his freshman class alone, there's 800 something kids. And, you know, I come from a school that's really small in Alaska. My wife came from a really small school in Iowa, you know, and he's like number 42 in his class, right? But some of his friends, he has two friends that are in the top 10. He's like, I got some pretty smart friends. I'm like, man, you need to pick up the pace. You know, you got A's, but you don't have you're not the Caleb, you know, level, right, you know, stuff like that. And then my daughter, you know, like, you know, she's on the dean's list because they understand too the importance of grades for money, for scholarships. But
sure,
you know, so my daughter's, you know, a couple months ago, I went to watch her play ball down in San Antonio, and she's like, Dad, this semester's tough. She's like, I think calculus is my easiest subject this semester. And I said, I don't think anybody's ever uttered those words that I know of, because, you know, in class. And she's like, yeah, I look forward to calculus because that's the only easy class I got this semester. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Geez. Well, yeah, I recall my my daughter tell me that she goes, chemistry wasn't, you know, it was tough, but organic chemistry, oh, that's a whole another thing. And And it is. I mean, organic chemistry is very hard. So those are probably some of the classes that maybe she's talking about. I don't know.
But she's taking organic chemistry, and she's like, it's so tough, but that's the area that she wants to specialize in is organic
Yeah.
chemistry. That's
Wow. I mean, who thought two knuckle dragon dads would be talking about organic chemistry?
no. And I tell people, it's, you know, like you were talking about with our kid, you know, making their decisions. And I tell people all the time, because I have friends that are still transitioning from the military, because it wasn't that long ago I left. So I still have friends, and I'm like, you know, ask me a question. I'm like, man, everybody's transition is different, and everybody's goals are different, and everybody's, you know, what you're looking for is different. I mean, so you have to make your plan, you know, have a plan, but it's like the military, you better have a PACE plan, you know, your primary, alternate, contingency, emergency, but make a plan, stick to the plan, you know, and then adjust it, you know, as you need to go. But I said, my plan and my goals are totally different than like what your plans and goals are, you know. I mean, that's just,
Right.
you know, I mean, I went to work for a bigger logistics company when I first got out, and which was one the sergeant major wrote me to.
Yeah, that was a great story. The details you told me about. You know, you had the introduction there, so you went in, and I guess you had never really interviewed too much, right, for a job, and so yeah, can you share that real quick?
So that's something I you know, kind of laugh about, like kids, they don't learn how to do balance checkbooks anymore and stuff in high school. I never knew how to interview. I never knew how to negotiate a salary. There was no, and I didn't know anything about it, you know. So I go sit down and talk to this lady. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go talk to her about a job. And then she tells me, she said, well, I'd really like to hire you, but I don't know if I can
and now,
afford you.
real quick, Robert, this woman is she ran the company, right?
She
She
owns
ran
it.
the
She was the
yeah.
owner.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it was and you know, it's a medium size, small, medium size. I mean, it's like she had like 100 employees, you know, a couple of warehouses on different coasts, here, yeah, headquarters here. And I was like, well, you know, she's like, but I don't think I can afford you, you know, based on, you know, and I said, well, you know, it kind of shocked me because I'm like, and I knew what I thought I needed to make it my salary in my head, you know.
And
And so
but sorry for interrupting, but she also knew you because of the sergeant, your retired sergeant major friend,
yep.
who had connected you, and so he probably gave her all the goods on, hey, this guy is the real deal. All the stuff he did as a warrant in the transportation field. Not just in the Army, but with all the services. That was, so she was probably like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy is going to have a price tag.
And right. So then, yeah, I told her, I said, well, I said, I know that I have a lot to learn in the civilian side. And that's the other thing I think that I see people talking about is like, hey, I've done all this stuff in the military. I'm like, yes. And I did transportation in the military, and I even worked at SD, which was predominantly civilians, but it's still different than the civilian world. Everything,
Yeah,
so you still
absolutely.
have a lot to learn. There's just a learning curve that's just massive. So I told her, I said, hey, here's what I need to make. And her eyes kind of got big, and she was like, well, I was thinking, and she gave me a price that was about $10,000 more than what I had mentioned. I figured, this is what I could pay. And I'm like, well, hey, just pay me anywhere in between there. And then as I progress, just pay me what I'm worth. And that way, neither one of us are arguing about money. And when I left, my wife's like, that's not the way you do things. And she told me, she's like, I've never had anybody tell me that in an interview. And I'm like, I've never negotiated salary, but as long as I'm making what I need to make, then who cares, type thing. And so it's a little different. You start learning about the whole package deal. I think I told you I went to work for the beginning of August, and Christmas time I get a Christmas bonus, which I'd never gotten because I've been in the military. Never heard of a Christmas bonus. And so it was just, it's a learning curve for me.
Right.
Going through that process too.
Yeah, sometimes the Christmas bonus is, hey, you're going to deploy on Christmas Eve, and that's really not the bonus you're looking for, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and there is there's an art and a science to transition, and some of the science stuff, I guess, and art is the negotiation for that salary. And if you never did it, well, then you don't know how to do it. And if you're not thinking about that, if it's not on your list of things to understand and learn while you're transitioning, when you sit at the table, you're not prepared, and it's not that you're a bad guy or a gal. It's just, you weren't aware of it maybe until you're sitting there. Then it's like, oh, geez, how it's like an elephant in the room to it. How do you address it? How do you go about talking about your financial worth? And, so trying to understand that beforehand so that when you're there, you've got your number and you can support it. But yeah, if you didn't know about it, and haven't had the time to even have mock interviews, right? And informational interviews where you can, ask questions of other folks that are out there in the industry that, well, this is how, this is how you do it, or these are some techniques. Yeah, it's hard when you go in cold and you don't know. But, I think your reply back to her showed her that you were the guy that, on top of all the things that make you who you are, she probably was very comfortable with you saying, kind of, well, let's split the difference there. And then, once you see what I'm worth, I'm sure you'll pay me, the right amount. And I think that probably gave her a bit of, comfort in faith in her decision.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, I mean, even the people that worked there were like, the lady that's in charge of HR, because it was like quickly, I started getting pay raises quickly, and all of a sudden I was past the point that she'd even mentioned. In about 3 months, I'd already passed that point up. And she's like, most people don't get a pay raise until their 6-month mark. And I'm like, I didn't ask for it. She just, the owner's like, hey, we need to pay more. And it was, so it was definitely a learning curve. The other thing I think that was probably the biggest challenge for me, you can think, understand it, but like in the military, nothing is money driven. We have budgets we have to live by, but nothing's ever profit and loss and money driven. And as much as we think we manage money and stuff like that in the military, I mean, it's never like in the civilian world. And so when I realized that profits, that was a hard thing for me to transition to, was caring more about the bottom line than even sometimes about people. Is the way that the corporate mentality was people are replaceable. We got to make money. And I'm like, I can't live like that. And it was that's a really tough internal, when that's not the way you've been groomed for, 2 decades, your whole adult life has never been about money. You always hear, people first, people, in the military, our best weapon is our soldiers, that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden you come into, well, that person's replaceable. We got to make this kind of profit. And I'm like, wow, it was a tough, that was probably a really tough thing for me to deal with,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, absolutely. And there's probably a lot of leadership lessons, laced in along the way when it comes to the bottom line, right? Because sometimes companies that are very bottom line centric uh, miss the opportunity from a leadership perspective in grooming their people, because of the cutthroat environment that they're not realizing, well, hey, if we invested more in people, maybe our bottom line would rise, and we'd make more because we're treating our folks good. We're training them. We're listening to them. We're allowing them to be part of the decision process because, hey, they're doing the job. Who knows better maybe than the folks that are doing what they're doing? It's like that when you shared with me that some of those warehouse workers that, you were talking with that had an idea, in a kind of a request that was either never listened to or they didn't feel comfortable bringing up. But when they brought it up to you, you were like, absolutely. And you made it happen. And then bingo, it's like, those are the kind of folks that you want being involved in a leadership role because you understand people. And I think a lot of, I know a lot of companies miss that because people are what things are about. Some folks just don't know it until it's too late, maybe. So,
I stayed with that company for about 1.5 years. And the owner of the company, she literally became almost like my mom, if that makes, age wise, but then like even personality wise, like we'd have our differences, but like I told you, we don't have any family in Texas. And she was like, you guys got to come over to our house for Christmas, and she'd give my kids Christmas gifts, it was just, so when I say literally like especially if my kids came around, it was like, she treated them just like she almost treated her grandkids, type thing. Wow. So it was a really good relationship. But I told her even on the day one in the interview, like even when I sat down in an interview with her, I said, hey, my ultimate goal is I want to own my own company long term. That's what I want to do. And she's like, hey, she started out as a nurse. And because her former husband was in the military, she went to Germany, couldn't nurse, and she started doing logistics. And that's how she got into logistics. And then he helped her, the German company helped her start her own company in the States when they came back. So, she's like, hey, I get it. Somebody helped me out.
Yeah.
And there, so when it came time for me to move on, it was a tough decision because I knew what I really wanted to do, but you become personal, very personal.
Oh, yeah.
So
sure.
When I walked in, I talked to her, I went in to see her and I said, hey, listen, I said, I've got to give you my 2-week notice. And she, she's like, get out of here, and I'm like, no, really, I've got this opportunity. I want to move, but I want to do something different than what you do because I don't want there to be any kind of conflict of interest. I don't want there to be any. And so I said, I'm going to, so we sat down for like 30 minutes. I mean, she started crying. I mean, it was a very emotional time.
Yeah.
And then she asked me, she's like, hey, would you, I need you to take these people out to California and go through the warehouse and show them this. Because I told my wife, I said, you never know. You always hear these stories about when people quit. Like, if I go in and give them a 2-week notice, I got to be ready to, that's my last day.
That day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was just the opposite. It was like, hey, can you take these 2 trips still in the next 2 weeks? And hey, do you mind staying on as a consultant? Can we call you for consulting stuff afterwards? And I'm like, you can always call me for whatever you need, and stuff like that. So, we parted ways on a very, and I think that's the other thing is, you got to part ways on very good terms, so do your best all the way to the last day because you never know. I mean, and she told me, she's like, hey, if things don't work out, you've always got a home to come back to, so, you got to, I tell people, you can't be arrogant, just, you got to work up to your last day. And then just like the military, give it everything. And then when it's time to move, then just move on, but move on in a good, a good time, a good energy and stuff. And
right.
So that's kind of like, when we decided to start our own business, and that's what me and my wife talked about. It's like, luckily my wife's an accountant, and I said, and I was like, hey, it's going to be tough and there's not going to be much money for a while. The things I didn't understand about starting my own business was sales. I didn't realize that, you think that, hey, if I bring a good product or good service, people just want to do business with me. And that's not really the case. You guys start doing sales, and I didn't know anything about sales. That's one thing you never learn in the military, sales,
No, that's right. Unless you want to be a recruiter, maybe. But
yeah.
But hey, real quick, kind of getting back to your story here on telling your employer that it's time. She knew in the back of my day was coming, and she probably rehearsed it, in her head what she would tell you too, because she wanted to, make sure that she knew, and that you knew rather, what she told you, that you had a place there because you had made it a home, with her, it sounds like, in building her business, and that she trusted you. And, the humility that you bring to all of this is so important too. And your words of advice, about not burning bridges and, leave on your best, possible with your best face. And that, I mean, that's a life goodness story. And that's something I think you share very well on LinkedIn also. So no, that's very touching, as guys, we can talk about things that are important like that, right? Things that touch you, whether it's emotionally or spiritually, and that's a great. It's in our pre-call, we didn't talk to that level of that relationship, and that's tremendous. You guys built that type of trust with each other, and that she was wanting you to remain part of what they're doing in some way, and if it's through consulting, that's probably a really smart thing on her side as well, to offer that to you. So let's talk a bit now, as you were again, leading into. Let's talk about TCN Logistics, because that's your baby. That's you're wearing your cap there, which is a really cool cap. I love the Star Spangled inflection there, and he's got cool stuff like tumblers. Robert was nice enough to send me this a couple of weeks back. Just in a transaction we had discussion wise on LinkedIn, and he sent me a DM and said some really nice stuff. We've been connected for a while, and he wanted to share that with me. And I told him this has become my de facto go-to travel mug. I mean, I even use it in the house when I'm not traveling, right? Because I love coffee and I like it hot, and that's and it even has on the back it's got, there goes my earplug. It's got information on his company with his phone number and all that neat stuff. But this color blue is my favorite color. I mean, he didn't know that, but thanks again, Robert. That meant a lot. As a friendship here that we built on LinkedIn. That's something that's very important too. And it looks like Michelle's got to go. So hey, Michelle, thanks again for hanging out with us. So okay, well, yeah. So let's talk about TCN and what is TCN? What do those letters stand for?
So I think that's probably the hardest part to starting a business is come up with a name. You go through different things. So in reality, TCN is my daughter's name is Taylor, my son's name is Cody, and my wife's name is Nicole. So it's TCN. I joke with my daughter and tell her it's third country nationals, but really that's where it came from, was TCN, because I'm like, what do you name a company?
That's awesome.
So as we started the company, it's another, you're coming into a space that's really congested. There's a lot of freight forwarders, freight brokers out here and stuff, but I just wanted to do something, that's more my personality, things I like to do. And I think we talked about it, and I just saw another post from a guy that's getting ready to retire from the military, and he was talking about what he's doing. And I really started thinking about, as I'm trying to start this business, is why did I love my time in the military so much? What did I love about what I was doing? And really, when it comes all down to it, it's you're part of a team. You're part of helping other people. You're doing, like, I mean, I always laugh at, when I went to 7 Special Forces Group, I was the only Maroon Beret in the basement. Everybody else was a Green Beret, so I'm just different. I'm the logistician. I'm the only support dude down there a little while. We deploy, but you had a job to do. I'm not the one in kicking doors in, but I'm the one that better make sure that they have the bullets and the food and the ride to get there, and stuff.
The enabler. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was the Air NCO for a while, deploying, and then became a mobility one. And once you embrace what your job is to help somebody else do their job, and you really fall in love with your job, your piece of it, and don't try to become a fake, you're not trying to fake doing somebody else's job,
Right.
They may have, I was laughing, you're in group, and everybody that's been around group guys, it's always the cool guy. You always, talk about the cool guy, they're wearing their sunglasses on top of their head, their, hands in their pockets, whatever. That's probably why I became a warrant, so I could do the same thing, but still be a support guy, but I'm like, but you have a function in life, and that's where I feel like I fit in now. I love what when I first started the logistics company and trying to, go out and talking to businesses, you get all these people telling you what you should do. And I'm like, man, this just doesn't, I remember coming home and telling my wife, I said, I can't do cold call sales, going knocking on people's doors. It's great for some people, but it's just not great for me. That's not my way. My way is, I love relationships. I love talking to people. I love hanging out with people. I love drinking coffee with people. I'm like, so that's the way I'm going to approach it. It's going to take longer, but it's going to work out better, because now you build friendships. And so far, I mean, we're about 2.5 years into our own business doing this, and our growth has been really good. And we've built some really cool relationships. I was just telling one of my friends last night, went to dinner. I was like, one of the coolest things I think that happens is when one of your quote unquote customers invites you to come hang out and do something with them, just because, I had some guys said, hey, come play golf with us. I'm like, man, I have not played golf in a while. My golf game is horrendous. They're like, yeah, we don't care about your golf game. We just want you to come hang out. And I'm like, so it's not all about money. And when you focus on other people, and you focus on, helping people succeed, then all of a sudden you start being successful. If you're focused on yourself, to me, it's very short-lived. At least for me, it would be very short-lived. For if you focus on other people and helping them, there's a couple of books I usually leave on my desk. Deliberate Discomfort is a great book, and he talks about one of the guys in there who is a former Navy SEAL and SF guy, and he even talks about it. It's like when you help other people succeed, you succeed. And then Extreme Ownership from Jocko and Leaf, they have some really good things, and they're talking about helping other people, and then you just focus on what you can, and then help other people. And I really honestly believe that's probably one of the biggest successes when watching a lot of these companies that are growing. Mm-hmm. I love going out and visiting companies, and I tell people probably half the people that I post about, the business I post about on LinkedIn, I don't even do business with them, but nobody knows who I'm making money from and who I'm not, because I don't let money be my driving factor when I'm talking about somebody. When I'm going in and when I walk into a fabrication shop or a machine shop or whatever the business is, money and my profit is not what drives my visit. It's going in and seeing them, and then if I can highlight them and bring more business to them, hey, that's great, So
and you absolutely do that. I mean, you're the living testimony of what you're saying. You see it on your post in LinkedIn, and I always thought that's cool. At one point, I'm thinking to myself, well, I know what he does. I wonder why he's I wonder why he's talking to these guys. But then you tell why you are, and you're promoting the goodness of what those folks are doing, and that's tremendous, because again, you're putting yourself out there, but you're helping other folks. You're bringing attention to what these folks are doing because you see the value and you understand value, and you know the value in what you do. So you want to also share the value in what other folks are doing because it's a good thing to do. And I think that's a remarkable way to live life. And, you talked about the guys wanting to play golf. Yeah, they weren't looking for a ringer. They were looking for you, because they know who you are and they wanted to share time with you. And that's a big deal. That's such a nice thing to hear that, hey, these guys, they like me for the person that I am. It's not that I'm some killer golf player, but the relationship that you built, they want to expand that. And it's about the relationships. Yeah. What's that?
That's part of their sense of humor. I was a good guy that could laugh out the whole time out there, So, no, I mean, and it's just multiple. And that's what I tell people, like the relationship. My wife kind of laughs at me, or she's like, "Man, you know everybody," and I'm like, "You got to know so many, And going out, like I said, go out and have coffee with people. I'll just go out and meet people, and I think you remember probably last fall, I took a trip up to through Kentucky up to Detroit, over to Wisconsin, just visiting different shops and posting about them. And every one of those shops was I tell people I was invited into them before I ever, there's no cold calls. I was like invited in, and half of them I probably didn't do business with, but it's one of those shops. When I got there, they were like, "Hey, we want you to meet these people." And then one of the owner just told me, he's like, "Hey, we want you to come back up in September if you can. We're going to this big trade show and we think it'd be great for you. And we're renting a house and want you to come hang out with us at the house. You can stay with us in the house that we're renting at this big trade show." And you're like, wow, that's a customer. It's supposed to be all money driven, but when you don't focus on the money, you focus on relationships. It really does open up a lot of doors, and you just get to meet so many people, and you never know who you can help along the way. The money will come. I mean, if you're honest and ethical, money will come. And if you chase it, to me, it's just not as fun. I can enjoy life a whole lot more by, having relationships, having fun, and then letting the money just come. That's why I love like the cup you have and stuff like that. I mean, I probably spend more money on swag than a lot of companies my size, for sure. Mm-hmm. But I love being able to just send stuff out to somebody, and just change. Just maybe it's just something nice they got today. They're having a bad day, and all of a sudden they get something. In fact, if you got 1 second, I want to show you this one. It's not my swag. I'm going to show you something real quick. So I don't know if this will pick up on the camera very well.
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah.
So this is Bennett trucking, and I know it's in the plastic, but they did a trailer and they wrapped all 13 people that were killed in Afghanistan, on the inside out.
In the closing, yeah.
And so my old boss, he was at US Transcom. He's the one that said, hey, I'd love for you to come over to Bennett, bring your agency, your truckload portion. So we're, did that. But they did this truck and he was the one that set it up. And on LinkedIn here, I've met a guy who's a Gold Star dad from years before, but he's become friends with one of the dads here. And we had a phone call, had a conversation. He's out in California. And as we're talking, I was like, I think I'm going to order one of these trucks for Sean as well. And it was just, those are the kind of things I think make things so much different. And it's through these relationships you build. So I was able to send this, and he sends me a message that you would not believe what just showed up in my house today. And I'm like, and it makes me feel good, makes him feel good. I was like, I didn't know whether or not I should send it,
All right.
Kind of want, but he's like, man, it's phenomenal. It's great, So I'm glad to be able to do things like that. And that's why LinkedIn too is not just about business, it's relationships. And you get to meet people, like that, and be able to do things and maybe just change somebody's life just a little bit,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a feel good thing on both ends, right? Because like you talked about earlier about by doing these things for others, the goodness that it brings to you, the spiritual side of that is huge. Because you're doing it because you care. You're not doing it for anything other than wanting to reach out and have that connection and do good in that regard. And Chris, who is on right now, he talked about it's being your authentic self, and that's so true. Being your authentic self is so important, and people see through it, right? People know whether you're up and up or whether you're if you have some other ulterior motive for why. And yours is, hey, it's about building the relationship. It's about getting to know you. And there's no expectation on what you're doing because you're doing it from your heart and because you care. And that's tremendous. That it kind of, almost tears me up when I think about the significance with that truck, what that means, it's a big deal. And I know he was thrilled when he received that, obviously. That's a good story.
Yeah, I think I saw Chris post down there, like, living authentically. Not, that's just, it's so true. If you just will be an authentic person, people, you'd be amazed the number of people you can meet. And, some of my best friends I've met on LinkedIn that I've actually gone to see in person are technically my competitors, but I don't look at them as a competitor because it's a huge world out there. There's so much business. So if the people that are worrying about dollars don't want to build relationships with competitors, but people that are actually worrying about relationships don't really care what your job is, you just, care about other people,
Yeah. Well, that's, I think that's tremendous, Rob. And, and again, you live that, to me, it's self-evident just by seeing who you are and certainly having you, here on this program now for, it looks like we're a little over an hour. I didn't even, I was engrossed in what you're saying. I didn't realize that we were actually past the hour, which is fine. Are you good with talking a little bit longer? Or are you?
Sure. Yeah, I got a little bit more time.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because okay, well, good. So what I want to do then is, so you've talked about your transition. You've talked about where you've come in life to where you are right now. I'm going to ask you this. I think I know it just because of seeing who you are and talking to you pregame and now in the interview. What do you see as your purpose? What keeps you going, and why are you such a positive and uplifting person? What's going on with all that?
So I have not always been the most positive person. I've probably been one of the more angry dudes. I've lived in an environment where everybody's a type A angry person, but I think part of it is mature. You get older, you become more mature. Part of it is my faith. I've gotten much deeper and stronger in my faith and my walk. So that has a lot to do with it. And then I think once you I mean, about 50 years old. So, once you get to the point you realize that money is not everything, maybe because I spent so much time in the military, I didn't have a lot of money. You had to have another purpose in life. But I enjoy seeing other people succeed, so it's like almost like my kids. Like, I love seeing my kids succeed. I love seeing other businesses succeed. I love seeing other people that are honest succeed, I mean? And so whatever you can do to help other people, and just be part of that journey. And then, like I said, you can't imagine how many cups of coffee that brings you. So, it's when you get to go out, just, I laugh at people. I might go have 3 cups of coffee, with other people during the day. And that's just, to me, it's so much more fun than just being in a grind and keeping your head down and, being miserable. I mean, I just want to, I love being around other people, and so that's part of it for me. Is it's maybe having this business as an excuse for me to be able to go out and network and socialize with people. I don't know, but that, and then,
well, that's a great deal. Huh? I said that's a great deal. There's a lot of value if that's true. I know you're kidding, but there is some truth laced into that, absolutely. And yeah, Sarah just typed that you're speaking our language, and I mean, absolutely, because we talk, weaving, the power of our story, Sarah Carell's power of our story. My program is part of that, and this is a recurring theme. This level of goodness and the sense of purpose, and that's something that I always want to talk about on this show, and just even in sharing a cup of coffee with someone like you're talking about, is getting around to that sense of purpose, because we that serve, whether it's military or first responder, firefighter, police officer, paramedic, whatever, we all have varying levels of service. But when we leave that, that was who we are, lock, stock, and barrel. And it's not just something you take the uniform off and go home. It's a 24/7 thing. And leaving that, there's a big void in your life. And sometimes folks aren't expecting that void might be what it is. And what do you fill it with, right? And filling it with what you're filling it with and the way you're filling it is phenomenal. And you are a case of goodness for other folks to, look to and say, hey, something about that guy. He's figured it out. There's more to life than, maybe some of the stuff that we think about, some of the stuff that we hold up as being important, relationships and other people. That's, I mean, we're on earth for who knows how long, right? And there's a lot of other people here. Well, there must be some reason why there are other people here, right? It's for us to know them and to care for them and to be a good person and try to do good things. And again, I see that in you times 10. And that's another reason why I wanted to, ask you to come on today, because I knew your story would be one that's worth listening to, worth hearing, but listening, because there's a difference, right? There's goodness there that I think folks are going to take away from this, and it helps people in their transition from service too. And that's what this is all about, is bringing in people who have different backgrounds, different experiences, and then sharing some common themes maybe, and beat that drum on, why is this person, why was their transition successful? And sometimes it's not successful from the beginning. Sometimes we struggle and there are challenges, but over time, we adapt and we start doing those things that bring value, and it's worth sharing. And I so appreciate your time here today, Rob. Is there, if you have a few minutes, I want to bring Sarah in now, Sarah Carell. She's been waiting and listening patiently. And as I always say, Sarah's a note taker, so she, things that touch her and things that bring value and things, she's making notes. So I'm sure she may have maybe some questions or some comments, and that she might want to talk about. And if is Chris still on? Yeah, he may have.
Chris is on. Yeah.
A question or a comment too. So all of that said, I'm going to turn this over to Sarah now for a bit, and she's going to do her thing here. Thanks, Sarah.
Oops. Sorry. Listen, I love the talk. Thank you so much. I love the fact that you started off in Alaska. I'm sure that's why you are so tough too, along with your great training in the military. What I loved hearing about today, again, is just your focus on people. The military was your job, great training, great, people that you were able to connect with and learn, but your focus on relationship with people, that's really who you are and how you're able to take that in different arenas, and I just, it's always exciting to me because, Robert, I was not connected to the military or first responder community. And when I landed here, it's a long story, but when I landed in this niche where I knew I wanted to be to support our protectors, I felt like I was in my own family of people first. And I've always felt like, oh my gosh, our first responders, our veterans, we need you so much to remind us of so many very basic, important things, that people really are the bottom line. And, just to hear that, I think there's so much fear of not succeeding. There's so much fear of losing money in businesses, that when someone like you comes and really reminds people that really is where things go from. And I just wrote a note too, that, connecting with people, really putting them first, that's why you've attracted so many of the right people. And so this is something that I want to remind I've got 4 boys. One is in sales and he's very much a people person, but just to hear you articulate that so clearly is such a great voice in all the stuff out there. So gosh, I am so sorry. So I just want to thank you so much. And again, I think the people on this call, like Scott and Chris, these are huge connectors. So it's really to have them on the call. That's all I have. Thank you so much, Robert and Scott, and I'll hand it over to Chris.
Appreciate it.
Wow. Sorry I was late. I think I missed one hell of a conversation there. But as a fellow logistician, Chief, I think I heard you say, right? I think it's very huge and impactful to hear somebody talk about that line of work in the selfless way that you present it. I was an ALC instructor for a bunch of years, and most people choose this job, this career field, because of all the things that it brings them. I can go to any unit, I can go anywhere, I get all the plush things, I'm going to be comfortable anywhere that I go. And one thing that I taught the young folks when they'd come to my class is that you actually, as a logistician, have the ability to impact morale and lead people and take care of soldiers than any individual leader in the United States military as a logistician. And you very much seems to have encapsulated that and transferred that over to the civilian world. So thanks for sharing that, and that you can be successful by living authentically as you are, and not letting the bottom line be your bottom line, but letting people and relationships be your bottom line. And like you said, man, when you focus on those things, all the extra things like money and other things, they come along with it because you're authentic, you're genuine, you're selfless in so many ways. And that military set, that soul that you obtained probably at birth, but was definitely shaped a lot more in the military, carried through. And people think that they have to sacrifice that to be successful in the business. And you've made it very clear that that is not the case. So thank you so much for sharing that, Chief.
Thanks. No, you're absolutely right too. It's if you focus even in the military, and we've all seen it, people that are self-centered, self-licking ice cream cones, they're looking out for themselves, vice the people that are looking out for how do you make the organization better. And I think that's how, one of the biggest things that, when I transitioned was how, you're used to being part of something that's much bigger than yourself. And so you're always looking for that. And I've gone into different veteran groups. You see me drinking the water glass, and it's one of the veteran groups I'm part of. Which you always need that, but then you also just have to focus on what is that, and that's the people. As long as you focus on the other people and not you, it just things will work out.
Yeah, no matter what book you read, whether it's emotional intelligence, whether you read Turn the Ship Around or any of these other things, they're not changing the processes, or even what is it, Dichotomy of Leadership. Everything goes back to treating your people right. When you treat your people right, you earn their trust. They'll damn near die for you, even in the civilian world, to make sure that you're successful, because they feel valued and feel taken care of. So God bless you for that, and keep pushing that message, sir.
Hey, Chris, that was powerful, man. I'm glad you were on the show today. That you're ending it on a high note with your questions and what you just said there about, you know, getting all those things. It's so important. So, hey, thanks for your time today, Chris. Okay, well, Robert, that brings us to the end here. You know, as I always say, these go so quick, and I've become a better steward of time. But you stumped me on that one. I didn't notice we were like 15 minutes past the hour. I was like, oh. So, but you know, hey, when you're enjoying yourself, sometimes, you know, and that's what this relationship stuff is all about, right? And not to mention, I didn't have to fill my coffee cup once. Usually I have my ceramic mug that I've got to fill a couple of times, but I've been good in this session here. So, hey, brother, I appreciate your time and sharing your goodness with our audience. You know, as you know, this will be posted on to YouTube on the Power of Our Story, Sarah Perel's Power of Our Story. So, you know, you'll see that here in a number of days. So, hey, man, again, thank you for your time. You have any closing comments? Any last thing you want to say? Or
I just really appreciate you having me on and having a, you know, easy conversation. I mean, I like to talk to people, so this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, yeah, same here, and I know Sarah feels the same. Okay, so hey, with that said, it's Thursday, but here's to a great weekend, one day early. God bless you and your family. Keep doing those fantastic things you're doing with them. You know, you're making a difference in a lot of people's lives, and it's much appreciated.
Thanks a lot.
All right, brother. Hey, good day, good time here, and we'll talk to you soon.